Madlab Performance presents The Lab Podcast. Here's your host and chief mad scientist, Dan Gilbert.
Hello and welcome everybody to The Lab. I'm here with executive producer and fitness coach, Alec Bulat. Alec, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well myself, man. Happy to be on. Happy to be a part of the team going forward with this. Executive producer feels like a lot, but you know what? I'll take that in stride for now.
Absolutely, man. A lot of this is your brainchild, so we love having you in a part of Madlab and as part of the podcast for sure. We don't have Luke Fine Arts Hillman with us today. He's currently at the space training like a madman, pun intended, as you see. Today, we're going to kind of progress a conversation from a podcast that we did in season 1 called Health is Medicine. We're going to talk about the current state of healthcare and health in our country. We're going to talk about how reactive it is, some stuff that people can do to take more control of their health with being more proactive and working on preventative health. And then we're also going to talk about some steps that we have at Madlab done to take care of some of these issues and help the community as well. Today's podcast is brought to you by FNX Fitness. If you're looking for a supplement company that will help you rise up, look no further than FNX Fitness. With products ranging from Recharge to help amp up your workout, Restart for your AM protein blend, and Rebalance for all of your super green needs. Whether it be gaining muscle or just looking to live a healthier life, FNX will help you get there. For 15% off of all FNX products, and this is important, use code MADLAB. That's a capital M and L. Make sure you put that in at checkout, and let's get you one step closer to your nutritional goals. Alec, as executive producer, I know you are super proud of my ad read.
I was. Honestly, I was waiting for it the entire time, and I think you did a fantastic job. I am actually incredibly proud of you for that. And I'm also just happy to have FNX as a awesome sponsor, and that might have been me pandering to them. I'm not sure. We'll find out.
We'll find out on a future podcast. Hendy, do away with this table for me. I can't have this in our way. Plus, you can't see the wolf dog, who was burrowing into the couch. But this is the wolf dog, by the way. No other explanation. No job title needed.
That was some good radio right there. Making sure that you're pointing to all the things that the people can't see while they're listening to us.
And this is a lamp. So one of the most frustrating things to me about the state of our country right now, Alec, is the healthcare system. Mm-hmm. To me, it just seems like a lot of it is reactive. It takes a while for somebody to get in incredible pain, and then they decide that they're going to go see a healthcare professional. That healthcare professional, a lot of times, what seems to be the industry standard right now, and there are some exceptions. There are some excellent doctors out there for sure, but the industry standard seems to be, oh, your knee hurts. Let's just look at the knee. Let's just look at things from a symptomatic approach, and then let's do what we can to Band-Aid before we replace it. So let's put some kind of corticosteroid in there. Let's give you some pain pills. Maybe just ice it for a little bit. I don't know. And then things steadily get worse until it becomes a knee replacement. And sometimes the conversation is you're going to need a knee replacement in 4 years. Mm-hmm. We have seen that a lot of that from a lot of the good doctors that we've worked with and been very blessed to work with. We've seen a lot of that is unnecessary and avoidable through good preventative measures. And I think that is where we really need to go as a country.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think I'd like to be a little bit optimistic in some ways, in the sense of we do have a younger generation of people who are coming in who are starting to understand these concepts, right? The people that I like to look at are like physical therapists who understand the importance of strength training and, what they like to call prehab, right? But it seems to be a smaller percentage of the wide majority. And I think at the end of the day, is, as you just said, right, is that it seems to be very reactionary based on any type of symptomatic effect, right? So you use the example of like the corticosteroid, right? So same thing with like Oxycontin, right? Like some type of pain pill for anybody who's taking something. And we've seen how much damage Oxy has done to this country. And it's stuff like that where it's I'm not saying that people should have to live with pain, Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of preventative measures that we could take to making sure that they don't end up with serious injuries potentially, right? I can't guarantee that. But also making sure that they're living a radically healthier and happier life. And I think that's the really big part that is missing from our current healthcare system. So I don't know. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about what you have, your brainchild, have started recently. I really want everybody to know about the foundation that you've created since first starting this conversation.
Oh, so I think that with anything, if people are going to complain about something, I think it's important to have a solution. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying this is a complete solution at all, but I always try to have some kind of action behind whatever I'm going to rant about, whatever I'm going to complain about. And I feel like I've dug into healthcare so much and so many different times that we at Madlab wanted to start a charity around preventative healthcare. Because as you said, there are pockets of the healthcare industry that are educating themselves and researching and really doing all of their due diligence and helping their patients in the best kind of way. They're teaching a movement and strength training, and they're looking at the body as a whole instead of just a knee or just an ankle or just a shoulder. They're looking at, hey, are there ways that we can avoid surgery instead of, okay, let's just get you to be pain-free or in the less pain as long as possible before we have to replace this. So those kind of people I love. However, it does seem to be smaller pockets. And then it also seems to be very educated individuals that, sometimes are expensive and not always their fault. A lot of it has to do with health insurance and drug companies and stuff that kind of run healthcare in this country. So I want to be able to give that to as many people as possible. And I think that the big hurdle is financial.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
And so if I can do something to raise finances, and if we Madlab can do something, or our health initiative is what we call it, but it's a lot of us from Madlab that run it. If we can do something to fundraise and then have those funds available to people so that they don't have to pay for some of this education, for this preventative care, to actually get some kind of like really smart assessments from some doctors that work with us that we're really proud of partnering with, and then get good training from great fitness coaches such as yourself and Luke Fine Arts Hillman and others, and Jules for sure, and Jack and all those people. Then I think that's what we have to do, and that's what we're currently doing.
Yeah.
So right now, and you know this, why don't you talk a little bit about your hand in it? Because right now you're working with a pediatric clinic that is really helping out kids with childhood obesity.
Yeah. That's matter of fact, I was just there earlier today, and I really do want to applaud you, Dan, for this. Like, I just do want to take a second to like give you a huge shout out for this because
thank you.
I was about to say, yeah, go ahead and wave to everybody in the crowd.
I mean, most of the time I get insulted all day. So,
I was about to say, I know Luke Fine Arts Hillman is normally roasting you constantly, so I felt like I would try and do the opposite.
It's probably deserved in his defense.
Yeah, we'll see how long it takes for me to get to that point, I guess. Maybe a few more years and we'll be there. Who knows?
It'll probably take like 7 more minutes. But that's all right.
Fair enough, man. But seriously, dude, it's kind of interesting because you could delve into some of the files that I have on the computer that you were just using. Matter of fact, the one that Hendy so graciously took away. And I have
man of many talents.
Exactly. He take pictures like an extraordinaire and also helps move furniture. So if you ever need his services, make sure to reach out.
He doesn't do videography and edit
no. Furniture
fix
is
people's social media platforms or anything like that. Just
mostly furniture moving.
Right.
That's what I know him for. But really, it's I was actually incredibly lucky to walk into the Madlab when I did, and honestly in general. But the reason I say that is because I have Word documents of rough drafts of nonprofits that I was essentially brainstorming with friends while I was on the West Coast. For everybody who's new to the Madlab family, and I will constantly talk about this, so I apologize if I've said it enough, but I'm from Seattle and I just moved out to Maryland. And we had always had conversations about essentially creating what you have, right?
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I haven't talked to you about this, but I was kind of saving it for the podcast specifically.
Sweet.
And I was just like, I walked in, and the minute you guys started talking about it, I'm like, there's no way. It felt like it was just the most serendipitous situation for me. This is exactly what I've been trying to get going for a long time now. And I told you briefly about how I was when I was working at 24 Hour Fitness, I was working with a homeless youth shelter, youth care, specifically across the street from where we were. And a coworker and I were doing an exercise class that we would do one time a week. And we partnered with youth care, but we really didn't receive a ton of support, right? And we were doing kind of on our own volition and using our own time and free time and our own resources and everything, right? And it was cool. It was great, but there wasn't a lot of backing to it. And it really didn't have the substance that our health initiative does. And the part that I find the coolest about it is because, especially just thinking about today, when I was there today, this was our second week. We had so many returning parents and kids there. It was unbelievable. Luke and I, once again, Fine Arts Hillman, we were flabbergasted, honestly, by how many people had come back to see us based on just one interaction. And I think it was because they recognized how important this is. And I think that's where one of my biggest my qualm, I guess you could say, with a lot of like our industry today and how we have it set up is that for people who are like socioeconomically not in the, middle class or upper middle class or higher, typically these services are really hard to get, right? They have to
or impossible.
Yeah. Exactly. And they have to break the bank to even get like some bits of knowledge. So, and this has been an issue that I've taken up a lot with a lot of trainers, and we've always had these conversations of what do we do? And finally, I walked into a place, had no idea, and you guys were doing something about it.
And one of the things, thank you very much for saying that, but another thing that really drives me nuts about this whole thing is, from a socioeconomic standpoint, is that these kids, right, come from whatever, and they obviously aren't super healthy, otherwise, they wouldn't be in the program. But they love moving around. The parents aren't neglecting them to do that because now they have access to it. Immediately brought them back. Mm-hmm. So it's not the majority of of everything is not the problem. Is not that these they're lazy. Like some people are like, oh well, the lazy people in here or there or wherever, or like because they don't have any money, they're not working or whatever. It's like people come from all different places and they don't have the access. They don't have the tools. They don't have the same resources. They don't have the same starting spot. And you can see it even just in the first days of this program.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I also want to change. I want to change the mindset with that. Give everybody as much as you can. And never going to make everything fair across the board, but as much as I can, as much as we can, I want to provide resources. I want to provide a starting spot that's much more in line with, I think, that things that every human being should have and have access to.
Absolutely, man. And I totally agree. And I think that's kind of what it goes by is, and I could go on for hours about how much I hate that.
We might have to.
I'm about to say, we might have to dial it back a little bit for us not to go into an hour.
The wolf dog wakes up.
Exactly. Well, which that could be never.
Could be 6 hours.
Yeah. So the idea that people like they chase after being unhappy and unhealthy and they just are inherently lazy, that trope frustrates me to no end because it's just not true. When people are given opportunities and I think this is the important distinction, when they're given the belief that they can change their life, that's when they're going to take action. That's why those 100%. Parents are there. That's why those kids are there. That's why they're listening to me. That's why when I went and talked to them and addressed them by name for all the kids that I knew today and gave them a high five, gave them a fist bump, all of that stuff, I looked at them and I said, hey, did you work on your homework that we talked to you about last week? Did you work on your squats? Did you work on your planks? Did you work on all the stuff we were going over? Most of them were like, yeah, I did actually. I tried it out.
That's cool.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if not, I asked them, I'm like, hey, this is my other question was, hey, did you go and play sports then? And a lot of them were like, actually, yeah, I didn't do squats, but I like went and played basketball like 5 times this week. And I'm like, yes, perfect. Like that's what we're looking for, is that we want systematic life changes, and we really want to instill that belief upon these people, right? Who don't get access to this type of information and this type of support normally, that they can do this. They can be healthy. They can live happy.
I would completely agree with that. I think one of the things that stops some people from doing this is, I think that the look should be, can I change one person, right? Can I make a definitive change in one person? Because no matter what, you're going to have exceptions. You're going to have frustrating individuals in anything that you do, right? It doesn't matter if you have a bunch of people paying for training. We've all had people pay hundreds of dollars a month for training. Sometimes, sometimes greater than that for training, and then not show up, right? So like sometimes it has nothing to do with what they're paying and their financial commitment or whatever. Sometimes there's something else going on that you can't control. And at any level, you're going to find that, and really in any industry or anything you're trying to do. So there are going to be exceptions, but we're looking at, can we change some individuals? Can we make a slow but permanent change in communities? And I think that has to be the mindset, right? And are we going to change 70% of the people that we see's lives in 2 days? No. No. But maybe a conversation makes somebody think a little bit differently and start to do things a little bit differently, and maybe that pushes the dial in a different direction. I don't know what kind of analogy that is, but we're pushing dials and we're doing all sorts of stuff.
I mean, but it kind of makes sense though, man, right? Is that like we're trying to essentially flip the switch, right? Like it's changing the dial, whatever, like
flipping
whatever.
switches, changing dials. There's a lot of things, a lot of controls.
Let's say we'll probably have to get Hendy for this one too.
Yeah, we
moving
will.
furniture, flipping switches, changing dials, all that good stuff. But I mean, on a much more serious note, I think that's the important part to take away from all this, right? And I think that's why I believe in it so much, is because I see this as, and what we were talking about and why this conversation was kind of the way it was, right? Was we see this as, we have a system in place throughout the United States where we are reactive, right? We give people stuff that is based on symptoms that they have, and they come to see people because they're already in a bad place. We don't want them to be there. We don't want these people to get to that point, right? We want people to be in a better position from the get-go so that they don't have to think about that. And I think the thing that needs to change in the system, and the reason why we're doing what we're doing, is because we need to put more emphasis on being proactive, right? And this is what you and Luke, and I've heard you guys a million times talk about this, but just to really rehash it and like just put it down in the ground, is like we need to focus on being proactive in the system that we have going in the United States.
And I think with that, there's got to be 4 main objectives, right? This is another important part because it's easy to get lost in details. And as everybody in this room knows, maybe not the wolf dog, but as most people in this room know, I am not a detail-oriented person. I try to look at things as a whole and look at the results. So I want people to move, right? Mm-hmm. So I want them also to learn to like to move. That's an important part. If they don't like to move, for example, if somebody's in pain, they're not going to like moving. It's tough to move. But if we can help get rid of that, then they're going to start to like to move more. They're going to move more often. They're going to be in better shape. Does that make sense? They should also know how to move, which is really important, so that they don't hurt themselves, or that they can learn they start to move even better and better and like movement more. And then they should learn how to continue that process and progress that. So if you can get somebody to do all 4, or really even just some of those 4, you're in a really good place. And those are the main objectives for what we're doing. And I think really just the main objectives, preventative health in general. One of the things that I want to go over with you today, because for that, I think that we have a good handle on what we do with some of the stuff that we're doing for our health initiative. But I want to dig further in, and I want to get into your actual programming brain, which I know that you love to talk about. So what I'm thinking, how would we explain some of this stuff that people could do and look at to actually be able to move better without having a professional in front of them, without having our health initiative come to their doorstep and be like, here's what we're doing today, and like learn all this stuff. one of the things I'm thinking of, and I want you to piggyback off this as much as possible. I think that everybody should learn at the very basic level, because then it helps them understand movement to what joints need to do what. Like that is a huge belief. You've seen me in assessments draw my stupid diagram. That is terrible. I draw this diagram. It's like a stick figure, and it shows which joints are supposed to be mobile and which joints are supposed to be stable. And your joints take turns doing a majority of one and a majority of the other. And I think that's a really important part of everything.
Yeah.
Am I getting too far too fast?
So I don't think you are, because I think we can, as long as we can keep this into a point where people are going to like understand from a base level, right? So for all you fitness nerds out there, if you've ever read the book, and I had to bring him up because he's just somebody I idolize. So Dr. Aaron Horschig, right? The guy who owns the company Squat University. He's a physical therapist, and he has a book called The Squat Bible. If you are a powerlifter, Olympic lifter, anybody who just literally picks up weights or just moves in general, it is a book I highly, highly recommend. And one of the key concepts that he talks about in this book is essentially what Dan was just talking about, right? Is the joints that are meant to be moving and the joints that are meant to be stable, right? So there's a differentiation between, let's go ahead and break it down a little bit for the people themselves, is let's go ahead and take the knee, for instance, right? Dan, so what would you say about the knee?
The knee needs to be stable,
okay,
right? And it obviously has some mobility to it, but it needs to be stable for the most part, because a lot of its mobility is going to come from the ankle and it's going to come from the hip. And the way that it's built, if it moves too much, there's going to be damage to it, right? So I would look at it that way. And really, if you're building any kind of strong structure, if you have a mobile joint, then you need a stable joint next to it, right? So if you're building just a construct or like a robot or something to take over the world, then that's how you would want to build it, right?
So that's probably the next plan, right?
World domination has always been a major fitness goal of mine.
Okay, cool.
And the bear thing comes first. So one of my fitness goals, I want to be able to punch a bear in the face without worrying about the consequences.
Of course.
Like a mean bear that stole a picnic basket or something, not like an innocent
you want to punch,
bear.
Wait, so are you telling me you want to punch Yogi Bear in the face? Is that what you're saying?
Well, maybe Yogi at least started doing the picnic basket thing, and I think that's his thing.
Okay.
And that's completely fine with me. But other bears that try to emulate that and steal that from him, and then also steal picnic baskets, that's too much for me. And those are the ones I'm swinging at.
All right. So let's go ahead. Let's get this together real quickly. So punch a bear in the face.
Yeah.
World domination with robots.
Yes.
And then also at the same time teaching people how to move effectively and in a healthy manner.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. All right, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you got it all figured out. We're learning a lot in this podcast.
Yeah,
I'm learning a lot about myself.
Yeah, it's I mean, yeah, you're right. Is that it's important to have and let's just go ahead and travel a little bit more north, right, from the knee, and let's just go right to the hip, right? So like, you see the knee, as we were talking about just now, right? It's a stable joint. We want it to be stable, right? Because we have a lot going on in the knee, and not to get too much into the nuances of it right now for everybody, but there's a lot of stuff. Everybody knows ACL, right? Most people have seen ACL tears. A lot of you've probably had ACL tears. I know, Dan, you've had ACL tears.
Yeah,
right?
I had one directly linked to a lack of hip mobility. So I had bad external rotation in my femur, so bad hip mobility on my left side. And then I ruined my ankle playing rugby, and still continue to season rugby. So I lost a lot of ankle mobility, and was playing a cleated sport. So it was just a recipe for disaster. So then non-contact ACL.
Yep.
Hello, goodbye, surgery time.
There we go. And this is the kind of stuff that we do not want people to have to go through. I mean, ACL tears are going to happen, right? If we're playing and pushing the human body to the peak of what we can possibly do, it's natural that they're going to occur, but it's trying to mitigate those things.
Exactly. And I think that looking at the body as a whole helps. So people don't need to know, like, if I'm running through it, like, toes are mobile, foot stable, ankle mobile, knee stable, hips mobile, lower back stable. A lot of people think when they have back pain, they need to stretch out the lower back. Sometimes that makes it worse because it needs to be stable, and stable really through the core. T-spine, so thoracic spine, mid-back, nice and mobile. Scapula, so shoulder blade, nice and stable. Shoulder, like glenohumeral joint, mobile, and then neck needs to be stable. A lot of people, I feel like, sometimes overstretch the neck. People don't need to, they just need to have an idea of that, maybe like a little chart that they get, like resource. But then there's some simple movements that come from that they just need to understand somewhat of those concepts, not in depth, just the simple concepts of what some of the joints are supposed to do. And then some of the things that they can do themselves to stop major injury from happening for stuff that they do every day. For example, if you sit all day, then you should be looking at your hip and ankle mobility, right?
For sure.
That should be important.
For sure.
And so like just little things like that, and just like some little things that they can do to prevent possibly years of pain and misery and really a loss of quality of life. And that's what we don't want. And when that stuff happens, then there's lots of doctor's visits. Sometimes doctor's visits don't end up in a solution. So then there's even more doctor's visits. So now you're not only looking on a financial crunch on the individual, but a financial crunch on the country as a whole, and an overloading of the healthcare system with, there's people that probably need to go to the doctor and go to surgeons much, much more. But now you have so much of the population going for things that probably are preventative, that not everybody's getting the care that they need to receive for much more serious stuff that couldn't have been avoided.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think really just to kind of wrap this back towards what we were talking about from the beginning, right, is that like we're trying to teach these ideas to people, right, from the get-go, right? So they have an understanding. And yeah, we are working with young kids, right, who a lot of people, and this is something that you've mentioned from the start, a lot of people are going to just assume that these kids just, they just won't understand. They don't care.
Right.
Exactly.
Aren't smart enough, which is ridiculous as well.
So something that I'm going to specifically note, and I'm not going to name names because I want to make sure that we're keeping that out, but there was somebody who came to me today, somebody who I had worked with last week, and we had worked on squatting.
Yeah.
And she came to me.
Very important skill.
Very important skill, yes, exactly. I mean, I truly believe that everybody, no matter what, should be able to squat. And even if that takes a ton of effort.
If you can squat well, body weight squat, that will get rid of a lot of future issues.
Yes.
Just that.
100%.
Yes. Continue.
Yep. So she comes up to me and I talk to her. I'm like, hey, so how is your squat feeling? And she immediately points towards essentially the insertion of her hip flexor, right? Rectus femoris, right?
Yep.
Points to that. And she says, I feel it right here. And then we start talking about what we had talked about homework-wise, as far as making sure that she was focusing on mobilizing the hip joint as a whole, but also making sure that she got that stretch through there. And then she started to understand fundamentally why that was important to the squat. Because then I started talking to her about, hey, this is why you're getting that pain. And to just dismiss her as somebody who didn't care would be lazy, right? On our part, right? It would be lazy for us to just be like, oh, they're just a kid. They won't understand. They won't care, right? That's actually not true. She felt the pain. She came to me and we talked about it and discussed why it was important for her to have proper hip mobility, for her to have a functional and healthy squat.
That is awesome. And that's a talk about another trope, not only in our country, but in the world, is that kids won't understand certain words or kids won't understand certain concepts.
Yeah.
Like that drives me nuts because a lot of them are really smart and they're sponges and they want role models and they want people to like help them with certain things. And who knows what they'll be interested in if you never bring it up. That is an awesome example. And that's exactly the stuff that we're trying to do.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And I think it's because of the foundation that we're able to do this, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, right, we have to look at it I guess not necessarily a looking glass, but I don't know what's the opposite of a microscope, right? We're trying to look at it from
macroscope.
A macroscope.
No, it's a magnifying glass.
Is it a magnifying glass?
No, that's the same kind
It's the same thing, right?
Well, that microscope would be
telescope. No, does that make
you want to see like a bigger picture?
Isn't a telescope like just taking you further? Microscope is close. Okay, Mike, help us out here, please.
Yeah, what are we looking for?
What are we trying to do?
Yeah, what are we looking through?
I'm trying to figure that one out too.
Okay, what's something that we could look into that would make it? Is it it has to be magnifying glass. Yeah, it's magnifying glass because you're gonna look at a small thing, use the magnifying glass.
Yeah, through the looking glass only gets us to the white rabbit. So
yeah, there we go. Great, great reference.
That's why I'm here.
But man, that also for how probably maybe intelligently sounded for a second there, that made us look really dumb. And I just want us to like retract from that and say, hey guys, we knew all along what a microscope and magnifying glass was. We were just joking with you.
Yeah, you guys can just fast forward through that part, so don't even worry about that. But Alec, you're gonna see that if you heard me train, I probably say something dumb once every 3 minutes easily. As Mike laughs over there from the production booth. Is that what you're in? Let's not even go through that. I don't want to get into looking glasses and stuff again. So I want to get into some simple things besides like thinking about what joints do. Now let's talk about movements people should be able to do, right? Mm-hmm. Body weight squat, super important. If somebody can squat down to the floor, have good angles, have good stability, good positioning, and then come up from that with no pain, we're in a really good spot.
I would argue that's the most important.
I think that's good.
I would say a good squat is the most invaluable tool movement-wise that anybody could have. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, our assessment usually starts with that, so who would I be to disagree?
I was about to say, I just think for me, it's one of those things that there's so many things going on with the squat, and there's so many things that the squat tells you right from the start. For me, if I'm conducting an assessment, if I'm trying to see somebody move, the squat is the first thing I go to. There's a reason for that. It's because there's so much that goes into just squatting down that you can see just a vast array of different things going on. You can see the difference between how their left and right hip are functioning, right? Like the difference between how they're able to stabilize. We're just talking about stabilizing through knees, right? You can see if somebody is just not as active, they're not really able to contract and keep that glute med really functional, right? They're probably going to have some type of valgus going on whatever knee is associated with that. Their ankle mobility is going to play into that. Like there's so many things that go on with the squat that like you can just immediately see and diagnose a lot of stuff just off of that one movement, right? And obviously there's so many movements out there.
And then it's easier to teach them other movements based off of that. If you have somebody that can bodyweight squat well, you're going to have no problem teaching them to hinge, because I think that's also important, right? Any kind of hinging. For sure. And hinging is just a movement that has less angles in the knees, less angles in the ankles. Think of a deadlift, like your bridging concepts. Actually, another person that we can plug a little bit, Dr. John Rosen, does an excellent job of differentiating the squat and the hinge. And I think everybody should look at that. For sure. But people should understand the two different movements, because if you go to pick something up, a lot of time you're going to hinge and pick it up, right?
Just to clarify, Dr. John Rosen he's the pain-free performance guy? Yeah,
I believe so.
Yeah, I was about to say. I know who I think I actually have like a few friends who have gotten like the certification through his program.
I always wanted to go, because he does them all over the place. So I've always wanted to go to one. Yeah, constantly. I think actually he does come to Baltimore. That's another thing that we all need to go to.
We
but
should
offline.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yep. Okay.
For sure. Off of the squat, so I'd want people to be able to hinge. I think some single leg stuff is really important because most human movement is unilateral. So teaching people to move in a unilateral nature is important. So like your split squats, especially for kids, but even like your hopping concepts, and even for elderly, I'd want somebody to be able to, even if they just hold on to something and slowly single leg hop, if we can get them to that point. Yeah. That's the difference sometimes of stepping off a curb and being like, oh, I just stepped off the curb and come back on, versus stepping off the curb, not knowing how to decelerate and completely falling and breaking the hip.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Right? I mean, I think that's
not an exaggeration.
No, it's really not. I think that's kind of the concepts that we're going for as a whole, right? Is like, at least this is the way my brain thinks about it, right? Is like, what are these movements translating to on a real scope, right? Like you were talking about hopping just now, right? What if grandma is walking down the street and somebody accidentally bumps into her and she has to suddenly stabilize through her left leg to make sure that she doesn't just fall straight over?
Well, I usually teach her a DN spin move, you see. So I just have her rip and spin and then attack the next family member.
Really tears apart the defense or the offense, I should say.
Yeah, grandma is vicious.
I was about to say, Washington football team, get ready. Grandma's coming. So, yeah.
Sorry, but you're exactly right.
Yeah, I was about to say, jokes aside, it's like, yeah, I think that's the important part of it, right? Is like, at least I know for myself, I think about all the things that I can do because I train the way that I do, right? That other people, even my age, I'm not that old, I'm 29. Like a lot of people my age can't do a lot of basic movements already because they've been spending, countless hours just sitting down doing their desk jobs, and they just kind of just go about their day from there, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of,
No one should feel old at 29.
no.
And honestly, that's right around 27, 28, 29 is when a lot of my friends started to feel old.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I was like, what are you talking about? I think you just have to move more. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's such a concept, and I feel like once again we could probably dive into this for like a 5-part series.
Another part of one of the things that we are going to go over at some point is we have a whole protocol lined up for a senior fall program, because I think that the way a lot of those programs and like senior balance is approached is very flawed, and I think there's a lot that can be done through just foot stability, ankle mobility, gluteus medius strengthening, proper like very very elementary deceleration techniques, stuff like that you can teach. I've done this with clients over the 12 years that I've trained, right? So I think that's a whole thing that we'll go into definitely a different podcast.
Yeah.
But those are important things to be able to teach people. And then you have things that you and I take for granted, like getting bumped into, like where you walk around. For some elderly people, that's really frightening, because once they fall and they break something, they're already not necessarily maybe moving well, and that could be a quick way to long hospital stays, sometimes at best.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of already, like, just to kind of piggyback off of that thought again, right, is like the grandma in question, right, the one who's really terrified about falling over or being pushed or anything like that, she's probably already suffering from osteoporosis at that point, so that break is way more likely to happen.
For sure.
And like, I think, and I mean, you could speak to this quite a bit, right? We're trying to make sure that people don't have to suffer from any type of, like, shoulder or hip replacement surgeries, anything like that. We don't want people to have to go to the point where they feel like they need to rely on surgery to feel, whole again. And even then, if they had to, right, being able to bring them back from that point and feel comfortable moving post-surgery as well.
And that's all just movement, right? We're just talking about the way that people should be able to move. We're not even talking about like stuff that how often they should move to take care of the heart, because that's something that we teach as well and that we're going through. Things like to have proper lung function, right? How often they should be doing things that way. A lot of people it seems common sense to many, but really for many in this country, because you have over 40% are obese at this point, right? So, but many of them do not know. They don't know that they should be moving X amount of times per week. They don't know they should be doing 30 minutes of exercise like 5 times per week. They don't know these things, right? They have no clue. They are like, oh, well, maybe I should do some exercise, but I'm not even sure what it is I should do. Maybe I'm just not a person that exercises. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
they don't know, because they don't have the resources. Food, nutrition, no clue. You have people that, again, it sounds like it's a simple concept not to eat like a sleeve of Oreos and then do this and like do this or whatever. But people a lot of times don't think about what they eat, even though, again, it seems like it's common sense, but it's not. People haven't been taught that their whole lives. It hasn't been pushed their whole lives. Their parents ate a certain way. Their grandparents ate a certain way. They were given stuff in the cafeterias at food. The cafeteria, of course, they were given them as food, and it didn't change into anything else. But they were giving certain foods at the cafeterias that weren't healthy. Yeah. Then from a socioeconomic level, you have people that are on food stamps, and a lot of stuff on WIC and on food stamps are like really terrible, refined, processed foods. So a lot of it is a push that way to so much to a point where you don't really even think about it.
Yeah.
Unless you have the resources and the tools to be able to have somebody speak to you intelligently about nutrition and things that you can do with whatever economic level that you're on, right?
Exactly.
Like some people don't have, some people don't have access to Whole Foods or something crazy like that. But there's always something you can do to become healthier, right?
Yeah, and you don't need to go to the Whole Foods, right?
Right.
Like that's the important part is that like people think that you have to go to you have to shop at, I don't know why I'm saying the Whole Foods.
The Whole Foods, like the
right?
Mad Labs.
Exactly, the Mad Labs. You don't have to go to Whole Foods for, you know, nutritionally beneficial foods, right? Like I think that's kind of the conceptual discrepancy, right? Is that there's really the problem, and this is what essentially what we're trying to combat, is that people have this idea in their mind and so fixated, and this is something that I'm really passionate about, is that in order to live a healthy life, they had to have been born in a certain situation or live a certain lifestyle or get to a certain point or do this A, B, C, whatever it is, right? They have to do all these things, right? And I think that's, once again, kind of going back to what we're trying to accomplish going forward, is we're trying to show people that you have the tools necessary to be able to do and learn and understand all of these things, right? Just by being there, just by showing up, just by being attentive, and just by being willing to learn.
I would completely agree with that assessment, for sure.
Yeah, man.
I mean, obviously, we built a whole charity off.
I was about to say, I would hope you would, because you're kind of the mastermind of this whole thing, so. Yeah.
Something like that. Like that.
Some might call them the mad scientists, but
The mad scientist. I do have a lab coat.
Yeah, which we'll get on for next podcast.
I might wear that next podcast.
Could
I might
you?
wear that.
Could you?
Yes,
Okay.
We'll see how crazy I'm feeling.
All right, fair enough. Well, I think this seems like a good point to wrap up for today, right? Just because, you know, honestly, I feel like we could probably continue on about some of these
Well, I
topics.
could rant about the issues with health in this country, healthcare, health insurance, drug companies, the way that medicine is taught, colleges to some degree. So again, this could be like a 15-part series of which Dan never stops speaking.
And as much as we'd love for that to be like one continuous 15-hour podcast,
and then
I think it would be it's going to be something that we're going to obviously continue to touch base on, right? Like, if you think this is the last that we're going to talk about this stuff, people, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast.
For sure.
So we're going to obviously touch base on everything going forward. But at the end of the day, what we're really, and I think this is what Dan and I were really trying to impress upon everybody, is the things that we're trying to do going forward through Madlab specifically, and like what we're trying to coach and educate people on, but also essentially for all those people out there who think that they don't have the resources, they don't have the ability, they don't have the ways to do these things, right? I don't want to say that's not necessarily true, but I want to say from the bottom of my heart is that we believe in you. We believe you can get there. We believe you have the ability. We believe that you can be healthy. You can feel good. You can wake up in the morning and be like, I'm happy about the person that I am. And at the end of the day, that's what we all are going for. That's what we want from you. That's what we want you to believe in. And that's
you
pretty
could
much
always
it.
not only use this podcast as a resource, but you could use Madlab Performance. I do all sorts of stuff for people and answer all sorts of questions for nothing.
Yeah.
And for no personal gain or anything, because I want people to have resources and access to stuff that I didn't even know when I was younger. And certainly a lot of people in this country don't know. So we want to help. We obviously have Our Health Initiative. If you guys want to use that as a resource, more than welcome. Please reach out. We're at ourhealthinc.org. If you want to get any information, or you need any help with anything, or you know programs that could use our services, or if you would like to donate, you could also donate through that website too, because your donations go a long way in getting some of these professionals to help out, helping us have resources to help other people as well. So please do that if you are able.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think, once again, it's just like, I hope this becomes a ripple effect, right? Like I want this to be the stone in the pond that kind of, ripples through. We'll see how far it goes. We're obviously going to be continuing to drive forward with these goals in mind. But if you do not live in the state, and if you do not you don't have access to this stuff, keep up with the podcast. We're going to be talking about a lot of good stuff.
Or email. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the whole reason that we have an executive producer here. Take it away, Mr. Executive Producer here.
All right, guys. So thank you again for listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please, please, please like, subscribe, and rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, really anywhere that you can find podcasts. We would love and appreciate your support. If you'd like to find us on social media, the hashtag that you're going to be looking for the podcast itself is going to be thelab.podcast, right? And then for any gym related social media, we're going to be under Madlab Performance, right? So that's going to be for both Instagram and Facebook. We're going to continue to produce a lot of stuff for you guys, so we would love your support going forward. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of The Lab.